What's behind you. Think about what's ahead of you, because right now we're not in too bad a situation. We can win this ball game. We're right even with these people again, and if I worry too much about what happened yesterday, it's not going to do me too much good. So I'm just going to be positive as I can, and maybe I can help the club with my bat in the last couple of games. That's what I'm hoping.
The tragic truth about Bill Freehan hit the whole baseball world even harder when Mickey Lolich died in early 2026, because that death did not just mark the end of one man's life. It closed the final chapter on one of the most famous batteries in the history of the game, Lolich and Freehan, the left-hander and the catcher, the two men who stood at the center of one of the greatest moments in Detroit sports history. And when Lolich was gone, that famous image came rushing back to everyone who had ever loved the Tigers. The image of Mickey Lolich leaping through the air, arms wide open, soaring right into Bill Freehan's chest after the final out of the 1968 World Series. Two men, one moment, a city saved. But the tragic truth is that the man who caught that leap, the man who held that moment together, paid a price that no championship ring can make right. I'm Mason, and this is Baseball Icon. If Bill Freehan's name still means something to you, use the hype feature right now and give this video some hype while we bring his story back. The stories like this one deserve to be remembered, and your hype helps more people find it. Bill Freehan was born in Detroit, Michigan on November 29, 1941. He was the oldest of 4 kids. His mother was Helen. His father was Ashley. He grew up in Royal Oak, Michigan, not far from the city where he would one day become a legend. He was a kid who loved sports the way kids in that era loved everything, which was with every ounce of energy they had. He played in the neighborhood. He played on sand lots. He played wherever there was room to run and throw and compete. And in those early years, nobody could have told you that this boy from Royal Oak was going to grow up to be one of the best catchers in the history of American League Baseball. The story of how he became a catcher is one of those small accidents that turns out to matter more than almost anything else in a person's life. During a Little League game, the team's regular catcher did not show up. Someone had to go behind the plate. Bill Freehan, who had been playing shortstop, walked back there and put on the gear. That was it. That was the moment. He never really left that position again. Even in those early Little League days, the position came with a cost. One of his first home plate moments involved a violent collision with a kid named Willie Horton. Willie Horton, the same Willie Horton who would one day become his teammate, his friend, and the man whose throw home would set up the most important defensive play of the 1968 World Series. That early collision was almost like a warning from the future, a sign of what this life behind the plate was going to look like. But Bill Freehan was not the kind of person who walked away from warnings. He was the kind of person who caught the ball and held on. When he was 14 years old, his family moved to St. Petersburg, Florida. His father had purchased a mobile home development down there, and the family followed. The Freehan enrolled at Bishop Barry High School, and he became exactly what you would expect from a kid with that much natural ability. He was a star in baseball. He was a star in basketball. He was a star in football. He was the kind of multi-sport athlete that coaches dream about finding, the kind of kid who makes every team better just by being on it. During his freshman year at Bishop Barry, he met a girl named Patricia Ann O'Brien. He would later marry her. She would later be the person who spent years caring for him at home when the man the world knew as a tough, unbreakable catcher could no longer care for himself. Every summer during high school, Freehan came back to Detroit to play sandlot baseball. His defensive skills were already extraordinary. A Detroit Tiger scout named Luis D'Annunzio watched him play one summer and made a statement that stayed with people for a long time. He said that Bill Freehan at 15 years old was the finest sandlot catcher he had ever scouted. Not one of the finest. The finest? That kind of praise does not come easily from a man who has watched hundreds of players. It comes when you're watching someone special. The after high school graduation in 1959, Freehan had his sights on the University of Notre Dame. The Notre Dame was a natural choice for a devout Catholic kid from a strong family who also happened to be one of the best young athletes in the state of Florida. But Notre Dame had a condition. They wanted him to choose one sport, just one. Football or baseball? Pick one and commit. That was the deal. Bill Freehan did not like that deal. He turned to the University of Michigan instead. The Michigan offered him a dual athletic scholarship, meaning he could play football and baseball, both. He could do what he loved without being forced to give half of himself away before he even got started. So he packed up and headed to Ann Arbor. And what he did there set the foundation for everything that came next. At Michigan, Freehan played football as a linebacker and an end under head coach Bump Elliott. He played with the kind of physical toughness that the position demands. He ran downfield, he delivered and absorbed hits. He competed against college players who were trying to make it to the professional level. This was not flag football. This was real contact, real impact, real force. At a time when helmets were not built anything like what players wear today. Nobody was talking about head trauma back then. The nobody was measuring the small hits that did not knock a player unconscious but still rattled the brain inside the skull. Those hits just happened. They were part of the game. And Freehan took them over and over, season after season. Because that is what tough athletes did on the baseball field. He was something different entirely. He was a catcher who seemed born for the job. He was smart, he was strong, and he could hit. In the 1961 baseball season, he helped lead the Michigan Wolverines to a Big Ten championship. In conference play that year, he batted .585. That number is almost hard to believe. More than half the time he stepped to the plate in Big Ten games, he got a hit. That kind of season gets attention fast. The Detroit Tigers came calling. His father negotiated the contract, and the Tigers agreed to a signing bonus of $125,000. That was serious money, but his father had a condition of his own. The Bill Freehan would not see $1 of that bonus until he finished his college degree. His father believed in education, and no amount of baseball money was going to change that. Freehan agreed, he signed the contract, started his professional career, and kept taking classes during the off seasons until he walked across that stage and earned his history degree in 1966 with a 3.1 grade point average. That ability to work towards something long-term while doing something hard in the present tells you a lot about the kind of man Bill Freehan was. His path through the minor leagues was quick. The Tigers sent him to Duluth Superior in the Class C Northern League. He hit .343 in 30 games. Then he moved to Knoxville. Then he got a short call-up to Detroit in September, and he collected 4 hits in 10 at-bats. In 1962, he spent the year with Denver in the American Association and showed the combination of strong defense and reliable offense that had scouts so excited. By 1963, he was in Detroit for good, and by 1964, the whole American League knew his name. That year, Bill Freehan hit .300. That might not sound like a stunning number until you understand what it meant. He became the first Tigers catcher to hit .300 since Mickey Cochran did it back in 1935. Nearly 30 years had passed without a Tigers catcher reaching that mark, and Freehan got there in his first full season as the starter. He committed only 7 errors across 141 games. He caught 517 straight innings without a mistake. He earned his first All-Star selection that year, and it was the first of 11. The 11 times the American League voted Bill Freehan into the All-Star game, he also won 5 Gold Gloves, which go to the best defensive player at each position every year. His manager, Charlie Dressen, said something about Freehan that stuck. Dressen called him the spiritual leader of the clubhouse. Not just a good player, not just a defensive standout, the spiritual leader, the heartbeat of the group. Veteran pitchers trusted him with their arms and their careers. When they climbed on the mound, they knew that the man crouching behind the plate was the smartest baseball mind in the stadium. They threw what he called. They trusted his judgment. That is a rare kind of respect, and Freehan earned it by being right more often than anyone else. The offensive numbers across his career sometimes get dismissed because people look at the raw totals and compare them to numbers from other eras, but that is not how you judge a player. Freehan's prime years fell during the second dead ball era of the late 1960s, when pitchers dominated baseball so completely that the league eventually had to lower the mound just to give hitters a fair chance. Compared to what every other hitter was doing during those same years, Freehan was elite. He was one of the best offensive catchers in the game, and he was also one of the best defensive catchers in the game, and that combination is what makes a player truly great. But all of that was building toward 1968. That was the year everything came together. That was the year Bill Freehan reached the very top of the mountain. The 1968 Detroit Tigers were a team that a whole city poured its hope into. The Detroit had suffered through one of the worst riots in American history the summer before, and that team carried the weight of a grieving city on its back. Bill Freehan was at the center of all of it. In the regular season, he set career highs in several categories. He hit 25 home runs, he drove in 84 runs, he was hit by pitches 24 times, which tells you something about both his toughness and how seriously pitchers took him as a hitter. At the end of the year, when they voted for the American League's most valuable player, Freehan finished second. The only man who beat him was his own teammate, Denny McLain, who had one of the most dominant pitching seasons in baseball history that year. Finishing second to that season is no embarrassment. It is an honor. That year, Freehan also cemented something with Mickey Lolich that no battery in baseball history had ever done before. Together, Freehan and Lolich started 324 games as a battery. That is a major league record. 324 times, Mickey Lolich walked the mound knowing that Bill Freehan was going to be behind the plate, calling the game, reading the hitters, and being the foundation that every good pitcher needs. When you spend that much time with one pitcher, you learn every small thing about how he works. You know when his fastball is moving and when it is not. You know when to push him and when to slow him down. You know the game inside the game, and Freehan knew all of it. The World Series that fall was against the Louis Cardinals, the reigning champions, a team loaded with talent and experience. The Tigers fell behind 3-1. They were one loss away from going home empty-handed, and then something happened. The Game 5 will be remembered in Detroit for as long as baseball is played there. The Cardinals had a runner named Lou Brock, one of the fastest players in the game. The Julian Javier singled, and Brock tried to score from second base. Willie Horton, playing left field, fielded the ball and threw it home. And there was Bill Freehan blocking the play plate with his foot waiting. Brock came in hard. He did not slide. He tried to bulldoze through. Freehan held his ground. He held the ball. He held on through everything Brock threw at him, and the umpire called Brock out. The play shifted the entire momentum of the series. The Tigers came back and won that game, and then they won Game 6, and then they faced the Cardinals in Game 7. Game 7 was Mickey Lolich against Bob Gibson. The Lolich won 4-1. It remains one of the great individual pitching performances in World Series history. And at the end of that game, when Tim McCarver hit a foul pop-up into the air, it was Bill Freehan who caught it. He squeezed the ball in his glove, and the Detroit Tigers were World Series champions for the first time in 23 years. The photo that came out of that moment shows Mickey Lolich running and jumping, arms flying outward, launching himself into the air with pure joy, landing right in Bill Freehan's arms. That image defined both men. It defined their partnership. What Detroit baseball meant in 1968, and for a long time, it seemed like it defined Bill Freehan himself. But the play at the plate in Game 5 also shows something else. It shows what Freehan had to do to be great. He had to stand there and absorb the collision. He had to plant his body and take the blow and hold on. That moment of glory was also a moment of damage, and the damage was adding up in ways nobody could see. In 1969, Freehan kept a detailed diary of the entire season. He worked with editors Steve Gelman and Dick Schaap to shape it into a book, and in 1970, that book was published under the title Behind the Mask, an Inside Baseball Diary. Before the book came out, Sports Illustrated published excerpts from it. Those excerpts lit a fire. In the book, Freehan wrote about how Tigers management had allowed Denny McLain to break team rules while everyone else was expected to follow them. McLain was the star, and stars got different treatment. Freehan said so, clearly and in print. The response inside the Detroit clubhouse was not kind. Players who felt named or implied were angry. Fans who had worshipped McLain were unhappy with Freehan for saying it. There was booing. There was a rift. There was a chill in a clubhouse that had been warm just a year before, when they were all celebrating together. Freehan believed in honesty. He believed in the truth. But the truth came with a cost, and that cost stuck to him for a while. Then his body started giving him a different kind of warning. In 1970, severe spinal problems stopped him cold. The pain had actually started years before. Back in 1965, he suffered a serious base-running injury that slowly created damage in his lower back. By 1970, that damage had reached a point where he was experiencing numbness in his legs. The numbness, his legs were going numb. That is not a minor issue. That is your body telling you that something is badly wrong. On September 2, 1970, Bill Freehan had major surgery on his 5th lumbar vertebra. The surgeons performed a spinal bone graft. People close to the team were genuinely afraid that his career was over. A catcher who cannot feel his legs properly cannot do what catchers have to do. The surgery was serious, the recovery was long, and nobody knew what the other side was going to look like. What it looked like was remarkable. In 1971, under manager Billy Martin, Freehan came back and led all American League catchers in batting average, finishing at 277. He hit 21 home runs. He drove in 71 runs. He started the All-Star game. On August 9th of that year, he hit 3 home runs in a single game, one of the most physically demanding positions in sports, after major spinal surgery, and he came back better than almost anyone expected. But the comeback did not undo the damage. It only showed how much pain Freehan was willing to carry without complaint. The injury was still there in the background. The hits were still adding up. The wear was still building, one foul tip at a time, one plate collision at a time, one season at a time. In 1972, the wear showed up in a new place. Freehan fractured his right thumb while tagging out Carl Yastrzemski. He played through it in the postseason. That decision had consequences. The Oakland Athletics were watching him, and they knew his throwing was compromised. In the American League Championship Series, Oakland stole 7 bases against him. 7. His arm was not right, and they took advantage of every moment of it. He played hurt because that is what he had always done. But playing hurt in October against the Oakland Athletics was a different kind of hard. In 1973, his relationship with Billy Martin turned sour. Martin decided to platoon Freehan, meaning he would not play every day. He would share the catcher's job based on matchups. Freehan hated it. He had been a daily starter for most of his career. He had carried this team through a championship run, and now he was being told to sit some games out. His batting average fell to 234 that year, and the frustration behind that number was real. In 1974, under a new manager, Ralph Houck, Freehan found something again. The Houck used him in a hybrid role between catcher and first base, which took some physical pressure off his body. The freedom seemed to help. He hit 297 with 18 home runs. It was a strong strong season, a reminder that he still had something left. In 1975, he was selected to his final All-Star game. In 1976, he played his last season in the major leagues, and at the end of that year, the Tigers let him go. He was 34 years old. The Toronto Blue Jays, a brand new expansion franchise, came to him with an offer. They wanted him to be their designated hitter. He would not have to catch. He would not have to block the plate. He would just hit, which was still something he could do. The deal would have extended his career. It might have added enough home runs and hits to seriously help his Hall of Fame case. He said no. He chose to retire as a Detroit Tiger, the only team he had ever played for. He later said that playing in Toronto could have added to his career numbers and given the Hall of Fame voters more to consider. But his identity was in Detroit. His life was in Detroit, and he had already begun building a business career that was going well. He made a choice, and he stood by it. And that says everything you need to know about the man. After baseball, Freehan moved into the automotive industry, which makes perfect sense for someone who built his adult life in and around Detroit. He co-founded a company called Freehan Boche, a manufacturer's representative firm that worked with the automobile industry. He also served as president of a separate automotive manufacturer's representative agency. He was not just a former ballplayer trying to use his name. He built real professional knowledge in a competitive industry and made it work. He also helped a former teammate build something meaningful. Hank Aguirre, who had pitched for the Tigers, wanted to start a manufacturing company called Mex Industries. The company was located near Tiger Stadium, and it hired many workers from Detroit's Mexican Town neighborhood, a Latino community that did not always get the opportunities it deserved. Freehan provided an important early investment to help Aguirre get the business off the ground. It was a quiet act of generosity toward a former teammate and toward a community, and it is the kind of thing that does not make headlines, but says a great deal about character. In 1984 and 1985, Freehan worked as a color commentator on Tigers television broadcasts. He was good at it, as you might expect from someone who had spent his career reading pitchers and hitters and understanding every small part of the game. In 1989, he returned to his college home and was named head baseball coach at the University of Michigan. He held that job from 1990 through 1995. In 1994, he led the Wolverines to a second-place finish in the Big Ten Conference playoffs. He was not just showing up for a title. He was coaching with purpose. From 2002 to 2005, he came back to the Tigers organization as a coaching instructor and catching coordinator. He worked with young prospects. He passed on everything he knew about defense, about game calling, about mental toughness and focus behind the plate. One of those young prospects was a kid named Blaze Salter, though at that point in time, Salter was not yet a professional player. He was still a child, still growing up, still watching his grandfather and learning what it meant to love this game. Outside of baseball, Freehan gave his time to causes that mattered to him. He supported Special Olympics. He supported the March of Dimes. He was involved with Wirtz Warriors and Catholic Charities. He had grown up in a devout Catholic home, and his faith stayed with him throughout his life. He used whatever platform he had to help people who needed it. This part of the story is warmer. It is the picture of a man who built a full life after baseball, who served his community, who coached young men, who supported his former teammates, and who gave his time and his name to people who were struggling. But there's a shadow over all of it, because the viewer already knows what is coming, because the body that carried all of this greatness was already carrying something else too. The Bill Freehan played football as a linebacker and quarterback at the University of Michigan during a time when helmet technology was not built to protect the brain from repeated impacts. Every collision on a football field sent force through his skull. Every hit that did not knock him unconscious still rattled his brain against the inside of his head. Those are called subconcussive impacts. And researchers have learned in the years since that they accumulate. They add up slowly over time, doing damage that does not show up right away, but builds quietly in the background. Then came 15 years of professional baseball, catching 1,581 major league games. Every single foul tip that rang off his mask sent a small wave of force into his head and neck. Every plate collision, every time a base runner came in hard and did not bother to slide, sent force through his body. He was hit by pitches 114 times in his career, which means 114 times a baseball traveling at high speed struck his body while he was standing at the plate. The catcher masks used in the 1960s and 1970s did not have the modern engineering that today's gear has. They were not designed to spread impact across a wide surface area. They took the force and transferred it directly into the face and head of the man wearing them. His family later said they feared that all of those impacts, all of that repeated trauma to the head across decades of contact sports, may have contributed to what happened to him later. They were careful about it. They did not say it was a certainty. The science of brain injury is still developing, and no doctor stood up and gave a clinical diagnosis connecting his career to his decline. But the fear was real, and the question was real, and the pattern was hard hard to ignore. He was not alone among his championship teammates in facing neurological disease late in life. A direct clinical link between McAuliffe's injuries and his dementia was never proven, but his story, like Freehan's, made people think about what those years of playing through contact had cost. Around 2007, Bill Freehan told his family that something was not quite right. He could not fully explain it. He just knew something had changed. The something was off inside his own mind, and he could feel it even if he could not name it. That was the beginning. Over the next decade, things got worse. Slowly at first, then faster, then in ways that no amount of preparation could fully soften. He had always loved to take long walks in the woods near his home in Petoskey, Michigan, with his dogs by his side. He had loved riding his bike on long trips to Charlevoix. Those things disappeared. The disease took them from him one at a time, quietly and without asking permission. By late 2018, the man who had once blocked the plate against Lou Brock and held on through everything thrown at him was completely bedridden. He could not walk. He could not speak. He could not feed himself. His wife, Pat, sat with him and talked to him and loved him, and she could no longer know for certain if he understood her. She could not know if he was still there in any way she could reach. The Pat Freehan was a registered nurse. She used everything she knew to care for him at home, which is where she wanted him to be, surrounded by family and familiar things. She placed his hospital bed in the center of their family room, facing a window that looked out over Walloon Lake. The water was right there. The view was quiet and beautiful and peaceful. On the mantle behind him sat his 1968 World Series trophy, the one from that great season, the one from that championship. On his hand, he wore his World Series ring. Family worked with Hospice of Michigan. A registered nurse came twice a week to check his vital signs and manage his medications. A home care aide came 5 days a week to help with hygiene and positioning and basic comfort. A hospice physician came every 6 weeks. A hospice pastor came once a month. A social worker came once a month. Pat managed all of it, coordinated all of it, and was there every day. This is the cost that did not appear in any box score. This is the part of the story that does not fit on a baseball card. The man who was once one of the best catchers in the American League, who was once the spiritual leader of a World Series champion, who was once the man whose arms held Mickey Lolich after the final out, could not speak or walk or feed himself. The game he gave everything to could not give that back. His grandson, Blaze Salter, was watching all of it. The Salter had grown up around baseball, around the Tigers, and around the shadow of his grandfather's legacy. In 2015, the Detroit Tigers drafted him in the 31st round. He played catcher and first base, the same positions his grandfather had played, for the same franchise his grandfather had defined. There was something beautiful in that. But there was also something sobering, because Salter had a front row seat to what the game had taken from Bill Freehan. In his time in the minor leagues, Salter suffered 2 concussions within 8 months. The first happened in Lakeland, Florida. An inside fastball struck the side of his batting helmet. The impact was violent enough to produce symptoms immediately. Headaches that would not quit, and a sensitivity to light and sound that made daily life genuinely painful. He went through the recovery process, worked his way back, and then it happened again. The second concussion came in a game with Double-A Erie. A base runner collided with him while he was reaching for a throw at first base. The collision hit him hard, the same symptoms returned, the headaches, the sensitivity to light and sound. His body was giving him the same message it had given him before, louder this time. After completing his rehabilitation and being cleared to return to play, Blaze Salter made a decision. In June 2018, at 24 years old, he retired from professional baseball. He was not forced out. He was not told his career was over by a doctor. He chose to stop. He said that he was afraid a third concussion would cause permanent damage to his brain. He had seen what happened to his grandfather. He had watched that slow, terrible decline up close year after year, and he was not willing to roll the dice on his own mind. Salter had a sociology degree from Michigan State University. He moved into medical sales. He chose his long-term health over his baseball dream, and the reason he was able to make that choice clearly was because of what watching Bill Freehan had taught him. Freehan's story became more than history for that family. It became a warning that shaped a young man's future. William Ashley Freehan died on August 19, 2021 at his home in Walloon Lake, Michigan. He was 79 years old. He had fought his battle with dementia for many years, and at the end, he was surrounded by the people who loved him and the lake he had always loved to look at. That afternoon, the Detroit Tigers were scheduled to play the Los Angeles Angels at Comerica Park. Before the game began, the team stopped to honor him. They held a moment of silence. Then they showed a 15-minute video tribute on the scoreboard. Photographs and career highlights. Moments from a life lived in the game. 15 minutes. For a man who gave the city so much. That same day, Tigers designated hitter Miguel Cabrera was chasing his 500th career home run and his 3,000th career hit. 2 of the rarest milestones in baseball history, and he was close to both of them. And so at Comerica Park that afternoon, there was grief and there was excitement side by side, the past and the present sharing the same space. the way they always do in baseball. The game does not stop for anyone, but it did pause for a moment. And in that pause, it remembered Bill Freehan. His funeral mass was held on August 28, 2021 at St. the Hugo of the Hills Catholic Church in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. His brother-in-law, Father Michael T. O'Brien, celebrated the mass. A memorial mass followed on September 4, 2021 at St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church in Petoskey, close to his home in northern Michigan, close to the lake where he had spent his final years. Then came early 2026. The Mickey Lolich died at 85 years old after a short stay in hospice care. Tributes came from all over the sports world. The people who had watched that 1968 series as children or teenagers or young adults talked about what those Tigers had meant to them. People who had only read about that team came to understand what the fuss was about. And everywhere, people mentioned the same image, Lolich in the air, Freehan catching him. The final out, the championship, the joy. The battery that started 324 games together was now fully gone. The both men had lived full lives, faced hard endings, and left behind legacies that deserved more attention than the Hall of Fame gave them. Freehan's case for Cooperstown never quite got over the line, and that absence remains one of the quieter arguments in baseball history. 11 All-Star selections, 5 Gold Gloves, a World Series championship, a career played during one of the hardest offensive eras the game has ever seen. The numbers, adjusted for that era, are elite. The leadership was real, the impact was undeniable. But what matters most at the end of the story is not a plaque or a voting percentage. What matters is what Bill Freehan actually was. He was a champion. He was a man who grew up in Royal Oak and made it to Detroit and caught every game with everything he had. He was the person crouched behind the plate while the whole city of Detroit was holding its breath, and he did not flinch. He was a husband who found the love of his life during his freshman year of high school and kept her beside him for the rest of his days. He was a father and a grandfather. He was a coach who returned to Michigan and tried to pass on what he knew. He was a businessman who built something real. He was a community member who gave his time to people who needed help. He was a teammate who helped a friend launch a company that hired workers from a community that did not always get a fair shot. He was also a man who paid a price that is hard to look at directly. The toughness that made him great, the willingness to block the plate and take the collision and hold the ball and play through the thumb and play through the back and play through every single thing the game threw at him. That toughness came with a hidden cost that showed up decades later in a hospital bed in a family room facing Walloon Lake. His story is not a simple story. It is not just a celebration, and it is not just a tragedy. It is both things together, which is what most real human stories are. He was one of the best at what he did, and the thing he was best at also wore him down in ways that took everything from him at the end. Baseball may not have fully protected him. The history may not have fully honored him the way he deserved, but Detroit never forgot him. The people who watched him play never forgot him. The family he built never forgot him. And now with Mickey Lolich gone too, the picture of those two men in that moment at the end of the 1968 World Series will keep living, will keep getting shared. The will keeps showing up when people talk about what the game looked like when it was played a certain way by certain men who gave everything they had. That is Bill Freehan. That is his story. That is what happened to him. All of it. The greatness and the cost together. He deserves to be remembered for both. Not just for the ring on his finger, or the trophy on the mantle, or the record-setting battery with Lolich, but for the full picture. A man who gave everything to the game, and a game that took everything it could. He gave it willingly, and he never complained. And that might be the most Detroit thing about him. He was built like that city. The heart on the outside, holding everything together, deserving far more credit than he ever received. Remember his name. Remember what it all cost. Remember Bill Freehan.